first of all, I would say this is the biggest technological revolution of my life. And hopefully I'll see more like this in the next whatever 30 years. But I mean, this is the big one. And just in terms of order of magnitude, like this is clearly bigger than the internet. Like the comps on this are things like the microprocessor and the steam engine and electricity. So that this is a really big one. The wheel. The reason this is so big, I mean, maybe obvious to folks at this point, but I'll just go through it quickly. So, if you kind of trace all the way back to the 1930s, there's a great book called Rise of the Machines that kind of goes through this. If you trace all the way back to the 1930s, there was actually a debate among the people who actually invented the computer. And it was this sort of debate between whether they kind of understood the theory of computation before they actually built the things. They had this big debate over whether the computer should be basically built in the image of what at the time were called adding machines or calculating machines. Think of sort of essentially cash registers. IBM is actually the successor company to the National Cash Register Company of America. And that was, of course, the path that the industry took, which was building these kind of hyper literal, mathematical machines, that could execute mathematical operations billions of times per second, but of course had no ability to kind of deal with human beings the way humans like to be dealt with. And so, couldn't understand, human speech, human language, and so forth. And that's the computer industry that got built over the last 80 years. And that's the computer industry that's built all the wealth of and financial returns of the computer industry over the last 80 years, across all the generations of computers from mainframes through to smartphones. But they knew at the time, they knew in the 30s, actually, they understood the basic structure of the human brain. They understood, they had a theory of sort of human cognition, and actually they had the theory of neural networks. And so they had this theory that there's actually the first neural network academic paper was published in 1943, which was over 80 years ago, which is extremely amazing. There's an interview. You can read an interview, or you can watch an interview on YouTube with these two authors, McCullough and Pitts, and you can watch an interview, I think, with McCullough on YouTube from I don't know, 1946 or something. He was on TV, in the ancient past, and it's literally it's an amazing interview because it's him in his beach house, and for some reason he's not wearing a shirt, and he's talking about this future in which computers are going to be built on the model of the human brain through neural networks. And that was the path not taken. And basically what happened was, the computer industry got built in the image of the adding machine. And the neural network basically didn't happen. But the neural network as an idea continued to be explored in academia and in sort of advanced research by sort of a rump, movement that was originally called cybernetics and then became known as artificial intelligence. Basically for the last 80 years. And essentially it didn't work. Essentially it was basically decade after decade after decade of excessive optimism. Followed by disappointment. When I was in college in the 80s, there had been a famous kind of AI boom bust cycle in the 80s in venture in Silicon Valley. I mean, it was tiny by modern standards, but it at the time was a big deal. By the time I got to college in '89, in computer science departments, AI was kind of a backwater field, and everybody kind of assumed that it was never going to happen. But the scientists kept working on it to their credit, and they built up this kind of enormous reservoir of concepts and ideas. And then basically we all saw what happened with the ChatGPT moment. All of a sudden it sort of crystallized, and it's oh my God, right? It turns out it works. And so that's the moment we're in now. And then really significantly, that was that was less than 3 years ago, right? That was the summer of 22. It was the Christmas of 22, and so. We're sort of 3 years in to basically what is effectively an 80-year revolution.